19th century music was largely shaped by German composers. 20th century music was filled with Russian superstars. From the ballets of Stravinsky and Prokofiev to the symphonies of Shostakovich and the piano concertos of Rachmaninoff, Russian classical music was one of the most highly regarded and influential musics in the world. Yet, this has not always been the case. In fact, until the mid-19th century, Russia was very much a secondary country when it came to music. A country that had not produced any composers of international caliber, apart from maybe Glinka. But this situation completely changed in the second half of the century, mainly thanks to two composers, Tchaikovsky and Rimsky-Korsakov. Though Tchaikovsky is now a more familiar household name, Rimsky-Korsakov is arguably the more influential of the two, and Russian music simply wouldn't be the same without him. So, what made him such a brilliant and influential composer? In order to understand his music, we need to delve into his life. Nikolai Rimsky-Korsakov was born in 1844 in Tikhvin, within the St. Petersburg district. From an early age, he showed an interest and talent for music, but his parents had a dim view of it, and who could blame them? As I said, Russia at the time was a secondary country when it came to music, and the few established composers were content with imitating Western or Germanic music. Following this pressure from his parents, Rimsky-Korsakov joined the naval school and then the navy. Although he spent most of his time at sea, his passion for music never wavered. Back on land, he took piano and composition lessons until the day his teacher introduced him to Mili Balakirev. Balakirev was a talented composer and pianist who took Nikolai under his wing and encouraged him to compose. After completing a circumnavigation with his fleet, which exposed Nikolai to a variety of musical styles, he took up composing more regularly. He started to work with Balakirev, who had recently formed a group with two other ambitious composers, César Sui and Modest Mussorgsky. Their ambition was to give Russian music its own identity, and they were soon joined in their endeavor by Alexander Borodin. And so the Five, also known as the Mighty Handful, were born. The name Mighty Handful was coined by Vladimir Strassov, an influential art critic. Strassov saw in this new group the opportunity to continue what he had started, namely the emergence of purely Slavic music, influenced as little as possible by Western standards. Strassov insisted that Russian music should use Slavic folk themes and subjects from national history. Balakirev, the leader of the group, was the only full-time composer. All the other members were amateurs and had other careers. Sui, Mussorgsky, and Rimsky-Korsakov each had different functions in the army, and Borodin was a prominent doctor and chemist. This amateurism was strongly criticized by Tchaikovsky, who said of the Five, Balakirev spoiled Rimsky-Korsakov's early years by suggesting to him that study is futile. He is the inventor of this new group, which contains genuine but uneducated talent. Balakirev was well aware of this amateurism, but he actually advocated it. He preached practice over theory. He believed that the traditional St. Petersburg Conservatory hampered the development of a national musical style, because that conservatory taught principles that were based largely on Germanic musical styles. This conflict between the Five and the more traditional schools might best be represented through Anton Rubinstein. He was a composer trained in Germany, and he founded the St. Petersburg Conservatory. Franz Liszt used to call Rubinstein Van II because of his physical resemblance to Beethoven. Not only did his appearance resemble Beethoven, but his musical approach was also very Germanic. Just compare this piece of music by Rubinstein with this one by Mussorgsky, and you will understand the discordance between these two styles of music. Regardless of who won this ideological debate, it is undeniable that both movements contributed in their own way to the rise of Russian music. So, now that we have the bigger picture, let's refocus on Rimsky-Korsakov. Despite his lack of musical training in his earlier career, the circumstances of his life enabled him to develop other skills. Since he was often in contact with the instruments of the military band, he naturally improved his orchestration skills and soon became a master. Moreover, the circumnavigation of the globe exposed him to many folk themes from around the world. The brilliantly orchestrated themes of his Spanish Capriccio are derived from this voyage. Rimsky-Korsakov was also a keen reader, and his knowledge of the Slavic tales and history was put to great use in his works. Indeed, he was a master of storytelling, and this is why he generally preferred to compose operas. His operas were his most popular pieces during his lifetime, much more so than his symphonic pieces. But unfortunately, these operas have mostly fallen into oblivion in the West, as have many other Russian operas. Surprisingly, the one operatic excerpt that has survived the test of time has also become one of the best known pieces of classical music in the world, The Flight of the Bumblebee. All these life experiences helped Rimsky-Korsakov to overcome his lack of academic training and acquire skills that many of his contemporaries, even educated ones, did not have. It is a shame that some of these pieces aren't popular today because they hold great historical significance. So let me introduce you to one of Rimsky-Korsakov's most underrated pieces of music. Antar, one of Rimsky-Korsakov's finest works, is a great example of the color he could give to an orchestra. It's an oriental-sounding symphonic suite in the same vein as Scheherazade. Although now largely forgotten in the West, this piece was more popular than Scheherazade during the composer's lifetime. It received high praise from many composers, including Debussy, who described the work as a true masterpiece. This tells the story of Antar, a pre-Islamic Arab knight and poet. In the first movement, he is wandering through the ruins of Palmyra when he sees a gazelle being hunted by a gigantic black bird. He chases the bird away before falling asleep from exhaustion. In his dream, he sees the gazelle, who reveals herself as the Queen of Palmyra. She expresses her gratitude to Antar by offering him 3 of life's greatest pleasures, which according to the poet are vengeance, power, and love. The next 3 movements demonstrate each of these pleasures. The best aspect of this work might be the contrast between each character, Antar and the Queen, the bird and the gazelle, and between each mood, the mystery of the first movement, the violence of the second, the triumph of the third, and the elegance of the last. Compare Antar's theme. Somber, slow, played mainly by the violins and brass, with the theme for the Queen of Palmyra. Gentle and graceful, played mainly by the harp and woodwinds. In fact, the theme of Antar itself, like a leitmotif, reappears and evolves throughout the suite. Its first appearance is slow and mysterious. It later reappears in the dialogue with the Queen, with his theme in the horns and hers in the violins. In the second movement, it sounds fierce and threatening. And in the third, it becomes heroic and victorious. The atmosphere changes drastically for the finale, which depicts Antar's love for the Queen. Antar has made her a request. He wants her to kill him the day that his love begins to fade. And she does do this in due course, with a kiss so mighty that Antar succumbs to it. In this movement, the gorgeous love theme is introduced by the English horn. Followed by a now peaceful version of Antar's theme. At the end of the movement, the knight draws his last breath in a final, melancholic appearance of his theme. The entire piece concludes with the love theme, which gradually fades away in a sequence that I can only recommend that you must go and listen to. Antar not only lays the foundation for the Orientalism that was cherished by the Mighty Handful, it is also the cornerstone of Rimsky-Korsakov's symphonic work. Generations of Russian and French composers would go on to use this piece as a model of orchestration and storytelling. From 1870 onwards, the Mighty Handful collaborated less and less due to disagreements between Balakirev and the other members. From then on, Rimsky-Korsakov gradually freed himself from Balakirev's influence and abandoned some of the group's ideas, such as amateurism. A year later, in 1871, he was appointed Professor of Instrumentation and Orchestration at the St. Petersburg Conservatory. At this point, he still had many theoretical gaps which he decided he would fill. Every evening he would study concepts that he could teach in class the next day. Every morning he would sit with his own students to attend classes in harmony, counterpoint and fugue. Rimsky-Korsakov was a hard worker and he quickly caught up with anything he may have missed earlier in his education. He continued to teach for the rest of his life, and the success of his pupils showed how well he taught. Anatoly Lyudov, Alexander Glazunov, and Otorina Respighi were all students of his, but his two most noteworthy students were perhaps Igor Stravinsky and Sergei Prokofiev. This golden generation of Russian composers, some of whom left the country when the Bolsheviks arrived, could not have come into being without Rimsky-Korsakov. For example, Stravinsky's legendary Rite of Spring features Russian folk themes, some of which were edited by Rimsky-Korsakov himself. But his work didn't end there. After the deaths of Mussorgsky and Borodin, Rimsky-Korsakov edited and completed their most important and unfinished works. Who knows what would have become of the operas Prince Igor and Boris Godunov without Rimsky-Korsakov's dedication? Perhaps Mussorgsky and Borodin would have been forgotten today. Nikolai Rimsky-Korsakov was a workaholic, and his devotion to music was unwavering. Despite his success, he constantly questioned himself and often sought the advice of others. His talent far surpassed that of the other members of the Mighty Handful, but it was his self-sacrifice and humility that allowed him to transcend those other composers. Had he composed fewer operas and more symphonic works, he might now be regarded in the West as a composer of equal or even greater importance than Tchaikovsky, just as he is in Russia. His death in 1908 marked the end of the pre-Soviet era. Most of the great composers of the following generation actually left Russia in order to enjoy greater artistic freedom. Only Shostakovich remained, and his life was not easy in the USSR. In the 1940s, Rimsky-Korsakov's name was given to the St. Petersburg Conservatory, which is quite a feat for someone who had opposed academicism for years. But it is a fitting recognition for a man who contributed more to Russian music than perhaps anyone else. Do you struggle with sight reading, ear training, or writing music? Whether you're looking to become a performer, conductor, composer, or even a better listener, these are essential skills on your musical journey. And to become a great musician, you need to master your fundamentals. Many people have never had the opportunity to develop these key skills, but without them, you are missing so much of what music has to offer, and you're holding yourself back from real musical development. I want to introduce you to the Musicality Training Program, which I spent the last few years developing with a team of excellent teachers and musicians. This is a complete training in sight reading, ear skills, writing, and music theory. It's possibly the first ever online course to offer a holistic approach to musical training. I don't think anything like this has been done before, especially not on this scale. All these different skills are wrapped together into a single training program so you can become the best musician you can be. If you want to learn more about this, you can simply follow the link in the description. I care about giving people a quality music education, and this program has helped hundreds to reach a university level of musicianship. So don't hold yourself back musically, and don't waste any more time struggling with music. Developing these skills is one of the most impactful things you can do to progress on your musical journey. So you can learn more by clicking the link in the description or going to insidethescore.com/musicality. Thank you for watching.